That's what my nervous system has done in the past is I don't have
Absolutely.
time to sit down and contemplate this. I don't even know where to begin to
Hmm.
contemplate this because I don't have that experience or wisdom.
You absolutely are right that the stress response will take you into doing.
Mhm.
So, stress is a stimulus that requires movement or action. So, I think that one of the most empowering things we can do is to stop, to learn about our stress responses, to learn about those generally, which you can do from books and things like that. But actually, if you're really interested in living into your full capacity, you're going to have to work on your stress response individually because it is tricky, tricky, tricky. And you know it is your personality.
I've created social media content from that false personality because it's
Me
worked
too.
for me, right?
Yeah.
And we do it. And,
Yeah.
I wonder how many other people are actually doing that out there.
Yeah.
And it's not coming from that root of a true and authentic purpose.
When we start to go on this journey of empowerment and we start to find the impulse, the only way that we've seen it or that we get initiated into it in our society is that it then gets co-opted by urgency,
Mm.
right? Because how many times do we think we should know everything before we begin?
Oh,
How many times do we have pressure on ourselves that we should be at the end of the journey? We've never even taken a step. We've never stumbled, right? But we watch babies every day, and I've never seen a baby just get up and take off running, right? So there's this way that like we forget that impulse has to have a messy experience, right? That like skinning our knees is really normal.
well, and I think that time function is a really difficult piece because I love that you brought babies into it because babies got all the time in the world to learn how to walk, right? I think I saw a
Totally.
statistic somewhere that children under the age of 2, they fall and like land on their butts something like several hundred thousands of times. And that's all they do. They get up, they fall down. They get up, they fall
Yeah.
down. And let's do it again. They get up and fall down. And they have the time to do that. I think some of
Mm,
this, whether it's perception or reality, that we don't give ourselves the permission and the room and the conditions to be able to
mm,
fail. So I see so many people
yeah.
who are starting businesses or creating coaching practices or movements and organizations when they clearly don't have the experience or the embodiment yet to do it. And that it doesn't take
Right.
away from the purpose or the heart of that, right? The heart, the
Right.
genuine desire to make an impact on people is there. But there's an urgency between, well,
Yeah.
I can't find another way to make this work. So I just gotta push it out there and fake it till I make
Totally.
it. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Oh, so much comes up with that. And the first thing I would say is when I was a long time ago, I read The Artist Way. I was like, how old was I? I have no idea. Somewhere in my 20s. I believe somewhere between grad school and having taking on a tenure track job. I started with The Artist Way. And one of the biggest things that that book like zeroed me in was like it was my job to define success.
Mm.
And it still took a while for me to go like ding ding ding. If I'm defining success, I might want to define failure, right? And so I think that we have to like it's our responsibility to define what is success and what is failure. And I think that without that we live in the abstraction of the perfectionist, right? And the perfectionist is like that pressure that it's never enough and it's never good enough, we're never enough, we don't know enough, and it just creates this sort of biofeedback loop of static of not enough. And for me, when living in that place, I called it ambition. And I was really ambitious, but
Mm.
really I was a perfectionist with no landing place and no definition of what I was pursuing or why. And so I would just set these unrealistic goals. And but from that place, like as you said, like I didn't have any of the things I needed to achieve them. Right. So they were just constant overreaches that then would just prove that I wasn't enough. And then I would sort of lick my wounds around that. And then I would just set some other unrealistic thing, usually things that like there's no way I could achieve that because most of that's so far out of my controllable itinerary for how I would even set it. It's just crazy making. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I no longer, so I don't even work with success and failure personally anymore. I look at capacity, I look at energy, and I look at the season. So for me, I have to look at capacity in three ways. Like, do I have the capacity to begin? Like, do I actually have the energy in my life? Do I have the resourcing in my life? Do I have the time in my life? And if I don't, it doesn't matter what the great idea is. It doesn't matter what I want to be doing. I need to have a real, just moment of a reality check that I do not have capacity for this goal. So it doesn't matter how great it is. If I do have the capacity there, then the next place I have to look at capacity is like, do I have the capacity to be consistent? Do I have the capacity to hold my commitment? And that's where we start getting into more of the emotional places, the subconscious places, our habits, our patterns. And so for a lot of us, there's a lot of work that has to be done in this place of our capacity to stay consistent with our commitment, to show up every single day and not fall back into the set point of the habit itself. Right. And so this is why we quit things. This is why everyone sets a goal and it never follows through, all of these places, because we're not tending capacity to show up. We're not tending the subconscious place where all of my energy is held in my trauma and my stress and that story from my seventh grade teacher. Like, all of those places that my body's still holding as stuckness is going to prevent me from having the ability to show up fully. So once I deal with that capacity, excuse me, then I have to deal with the capacity to change. Do I have the capacity to be successful? And this comes into our identity. Am I so entrenched in my identity from the past that I can't even see who I would be from this next level? Right? Because if we don't know where we're going, how could we go there? If there hasn't been some experience, so the body follows the energy it can know. If I've had no experience of something, there is no way I have a capacity to begin to shift the identity towards it. So this is why I think community is so essential, because sometimes how I get that experience is I listen to Sue or John or Mary share their growth or their thing that they did. And that gives me the experience of going, oh, that's what I can feel, that through their body. I can feel that through their words. Oh, that's what it is when you believe in yourself. That's what it is when you go, you go for that thing. Like, oh, now I've got an experience that begins to give me the capacity to change my identity and let go of the past identity. Right. And so for me, I don't worry about whether I'm succeeding or failing. I worry about like the capacity in those ways. I also worry about whether I'm following my own interest, which for a lot of us, so I'm a firstborn. And I took on that kind of role of like, my job was to make sure my parents were really happy about what I was doing. I'm also a rebel. So that has always created a little bit of conflict in my life, where I both am like trying to follow authority and do what they want me to do, and then also needing to rebel against it. And so that can create a lot of mess in my life if I'm not paying attention to that place of like, am I actually interested in this? Am I doing this because I want to be doing it? Or am I doing it for that outside validation? Am I doing it because I think this is what everyone else wants from me or expects from me? I really have to tend that line, because I can very easily kind of mask my own desires because it would better serve everybody else, because it's going to make I had a university job for years, and one of the biggest reasons is because I knew it made my dad happy that I had health insurance, that he didn't, that he'd have to worry about me being a starving artist or a dancer living in New York, but that like I had taken a real job and they gave health insurance. And I've loved part of my university job and it was a great growth experience, but at the same time, I wasn't completely following what I wanted to be doing or my interest. And I always was trying to co-opt add in my own self to my life.
Man, there's so much in there to pick apart and dive into. I'm glad that you mentioned the communal piece, because when you were starting to talk about capacity and taking what sounded to me like really slowing down and taking time to take inventory. Do I have the capacity for this? Do I have the resources? Do I have the experience and the knowledge? And then taking it to the next level. Am I resourced with the things that I require to actually move this forward?
Yeah.
In my mind, I imagined some of the listeners out there hitting that wall right away and be like, I I don't know. And then going into what I think would be like a nervous system response where it's,
Totally.
I can't even do this. I just got to go and take action. That's what my nervous system has done in the past is I don't have
Absolutely.
time to sit down and contemplate this. I don't even know where to begin to
Mm-hmm.
contemplate this because I don't have that experience or wisdom. So I'm glad you brought in the community piece because that's for me right where it comes into play. It's like yes, and we're not supposed to have to go through these
Right.
sequences alone. And
Yeah.
so whether it's the community piece you dive into first, I really would love to have you bring in the nervous system perspective
Yeah.
and bringing that layer into how we move through these sequences.
Yeah. So let's just do the nervous system first. So you absolutely are right that the stress response will take you into doing.
Mm-hmm.
So stress is a stimulus that requires movement or action.
Mm-hmm.
So our stress comes in, so we do something. Our addiction to living that way is how we get shit done. And most of us are not aware enough or in tune enough to paying attention to our stress response. And we call it our personality, but it's actually a stress response,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we become really comfortable in the identification of our stress response. And it's how we know ourselves. It's how we locate ourselves. It's how we track ourselves. It's how we know if we're doing quote unquote good or bad, or if I'm feeling like myself or not. And so what's happening every time we're using our stress response improperly, right? Our stress response is a beautiful, innate, wise part of our system that we as modern day people are screwing with and just making into all of these coping mechanisms that are creating these massive stress maps in our system that we then have really complicated personalities around, um, rather than just accepting it's a stimulus. I don't feel safe to sit here slowly and feel and process because I've been taught that if I don't know, I am unsafe. So, one of the biggest tigers that we have in modern day life is I don't know. I'm so confused. This is really hard, right? Those are places where we act like we're gonna die because we don't know the answer. We haven't even formed a good question. We don't even ask wise questions. We just come from this place of I don't know. I used to have a rule in my studio class, right, where the students would be like, I would do something and they'd be like, I'm so confused. And so like on my syllabus it says, we may not say I'm so confused before we have tried. Before you have done it, like you don't know if you don't know. You've not done anything, right? You've not been there long enough. So I think that one of the most empowering things we can do is to stop, to learn about our stress responses, to learn about those generally, which you can do from books and things like that. But actually, if you're really interested in living into your full capacity, you're going to have to work on your stress response individually because it is tricky, tricky, tricky. And you know it is your personality. And so it takes someone else's eyes to be like, let's let's dig right there into that word, into that behavior, and let's begin to identify how your survival self is showing up in that, right? And where's the lack of safety? And I think that too, like every time, and you and I are both warrior systems, and so we feel a lack of safety very differently than some other systems might, right? So and I won't speak for you, but for myself, like I didn't actually feel fear. What I now know other people feel is like visceral fear in their body. I didn't feel that till I was 38. Like I'd never had an emotional fear in my body, and it wasn't till after an ayahuasca ceremony that my nervous system opened up enough to be like, oh, and I was like, oh, this is full body visceral fear. Cool. This is what everyone's been telling me about why they can't take an action because my system can override that.
Sure.
Right, because I'm of the warrior clan, and so we will go chasing the tigers so that other people don't have to, right? So we all experience it differently, but that's still a lack of my safety. Me running after the tiger yelling all of the time is still a lack of safety in my system because if there's a tiger in my room, I have come from the perspective that I am not safe here in my body.
Yeah.
right? So it's important for us to have the space to be held in looking at how our stress response has been shaped.
Mhm.
A lot of our stress response is not shaped by ourselves. It's shaped from our family. It's shaped from other people. We co-opt other people's stress responses as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, you're going to say something.
No, no, that's great. And I just want to interject for a moment to pick this apart, because I think the conversation about safety and survival is one that people still need a lot of permission to begin
Yeah.
having, especially men, because you were talking about different archetypal systems, and one of the things in terms of social narratives that men have been led to believe is that we're all just these. If you're not a rock solid warrior without any emotions or feelings and no
Yeah.
fear, then you have no value in our
Yeah.
society. Go come
Yeah.
back when you figured that out. And the motivation from stress responses, whoa, like that's been such a huge revelation for myself. And like
Yeah.
you said about building up a personality and an identity around a stress response, I remember when you first revealed that to me, and I was like, damn, you're right. Because I knew that about myself. In fact, I prided myself on it. I've created social media content from that false personality because it's
Me
worked
too.
for me. Right.
Yeah.
And we do it.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many other people are actually doing that out there.
Yeah.
And it's not coming from that root of a true and authentic purpose. So again, without spiraling off too far, just this conversation
Yeah.
about safety and survival, and using that as a
Yeah.
baseline reference, whether you're a man, a woman, whether you're young or old, but as a
Yeah.
baseline beginning point, and then moving
Yeah.
forward from there. How does that actually look for somebody who's just beginning to take a look at this false personality?
It's such an important question. So if we back it up and we say we are born with our gift and our shadow active, they're both innate, right? Because the gift and the shadow are the two sides of the same coin. So I am born with like my curriculum, and that comes through the gift and the shadow, and they're both there. And so when I'm young, I have probably pretty equal access to my gift and my shadow, right? Because the shadow just being the unconscious part that hasn't come fully into integration. It's not as aware, it's not as refined, right? It's also plugged in more to the collectiveness of it. The gift part, maybe, I don't know, past life, we could do whatever. But anyway, it's more of the refined aspect, right? It's more of the place that's coming from a little bit higher consciousness or deeper consciousness.
Mm.
And so for me, I have a gift of performing. I was born a dancer, and I've always wanted to be on stage. I don't have trouble talking on stage. I'd rather do that than have to have like a small talk at a party. Like I'll go give a talk to 3,000 people, no problem. Having to have a conversation one to one at a party, like that is really hard. So the gift of my ability to be on stage also has a shadow that I can pursue that in a way that's real, and have pursued that in a way that's really detrimental to my well-being, really detrimental to mental health and physical health and all of these things. So if I want to move out of the survival aspects, I have to heal where I'm following the shadow or resistant to the shadow, so that I am more in the consciousness of the gift part, right? Which means if we say that we're going to live in the gift, what we're going to do is we're going to open up multiple choices. We're going to have more of that capacity we're talking about, more ability to see it from 360 degrees. Shadow keeps it narrow. Shadow keeps it small. So so part of the shadow of us could be like, this is what I have to do, and this is how I have to do it. And that's what we see a lot in leaders. I'm following the gift part of this is what I'm here to do. But through the shadow path of I have to do it this way, or everyone's expecting this from me, or I don't get any space for myself, or whatever it is. And that's where the survival part comes in. Right? And the survival is going to be finite energy. It's going to need, it's not going, it can't, it's going to hit a wall. Right? Because we're only meant to survive until we're back to thriving, until we're back to safety.